Hopefully you have your index.php file set up and you're ready to start splitting apart some of this into a header.php file. Now what I want to point out is not only can we have a header.php file, which WordPress will automatically find if we name it this way, but we could also have custom headers, and we could have multiple ones. So if you've been to a site and some landing pages have a really stripped down header and then their main site has something else, and maybe even on the home page it has a slightly different one, we could have different custom headers in WordPress. So let's take a look at how to set up our standard header.php. And again, we have to name it this so that WordPress will find it. And let's take a look at how to do some custom ones as well. So here's how to think about what goes in a header. Basically, all of your header content, so anything inside of your head HTML tags, up to anything that you want repeated on the same page or repeated on every page that this header is going to be included. So for us, that's going to include everything from the body tag up. So what I'm going to do is cut this out, and then I'm going to create a new file and paste it in and save this as header.php. So this will be our header file. And before we wrap this up and look at how to do some custom ones and link this in, I want to point out one thing that we will change here. Now this is a template tag and it's getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but I do want to mention the importance of adding WP head. And what this does is give WordPress, and via WordPress, any plugin and theme, the ability to add anything they want before the closing of the head tag. So this is going to include some special HTML characters, maybe for findability and SEO purposes. It's going to include links to style sheets. So remember what we did in our functions.php and we enqueued scripts? Well, enqueue scripts hooks in with WP head. So that's how we're going to get our CSS to load. Also, when we put in add theme support for title tag, that is now automatically going to come in and add the title tag that we removed from being hard-coded. And again, it's a best practice. You don't want that title tag in there. So we have this header done. Now in our index.php, we have to get that header to load. And the reason we name it header.php is we can use get header, and that will automatically pull in our header file. So let's just test this out real quick. Wow, look at the change there. If I come into my site and view inspector, let's just pop open this inspector. Notice that I have all the HTML I would expect to find in there. And let's see what we've got. Oh man, we've got a whole bunch of new HTML stuff put in here. And then we've got a script tag. So there's some JavaScript that we didn't write that is getting put in there. That's from WordPress. And there's some styling. This looks like emoji related stuff. So that's getting thrown in there. And then let's see, we have a whole bunch of style sheets. And notice that this is coming from the WP includes folder. And if you remember back to our PHP for WordPress section, that means that this is some file that WordPress is shipping it with. And we could see, that's our dash icons displaying there, the CSS that's going to be used in some of the menu items. And let's see what else we've got here. Admin bar. Notice the admin bar isn't appearing yet, and we'll get to that in the next video, why that isn't loading yet. But the CSS is loading for it. It's just not fully working yet. But here's really what we want. This is our style. This is our style.css file. This is in our theme, our WP hierarchy. And notice the version. This is the timestamp that we set so that if I were to refresh this and come back down, notice that we have a different timestamp going on. We have some API stuff and a whole bunch more. So all of this is things that we did not put in, but because we put in that WP head, it's all working. And of course, the most obvious thing is now our main style sheet is loading, and that's great. So coming back into our code here, I did tell you that we could do custom headers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this header as header-splash. And you can name the dash whatever you want. I'd suggest something semantic, something that represents what it is. So obviously this is going to be a header for a splash page. And what you often see in splash pages is that content is stripped out. There's no, oftentimes link back. Your main menu is missing. We don't have that stuff yet, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in a notice and say new lorem to the cell thisum. and they could go by there. We could do whatever we want in that. But if we come back into our index.php in get header, all we have to do now is say header splash. And WordPress will automatically know, hey, look for a file header-splash and load that. So if we come back over to our site now, boom, we've got this new thing here. And if we wanted to remove the menu or do other fancy stuff, we could totally do that. I realize this isn't looking super nice yet. It'll fill out as we go, trust me. Now let's check something. What if we have this in our code, but we were to delete this? Or let's simply rename it underscore something else. So it's not going to find it. We don't have to delete it completely. Now, if that's not there, what happens to our theme? Notice that it defaults back to our original header. So it still works even if it's not there. And this kind of fallback approach is really helpful. Because imagine at one point you were building a theme and it had this in it, but then it got removed or you no longer needed it and this code was still there. It won't break your entire site. So that's just a helpful thing to know. You could build with confidence around that. But that's how you would create multiple headers. So I'm going to remove this for now. Later on, we'll talk about conditional tags and when you might want to load one header versus another, that sort of thing. But for now, we've got that set up. We know how it works. So we're going to leave it as default. And now we're going to turn to our footer and get that working in very much the same way. So what you have to do at this point is get your own headers working, get a custom header, play around with that, and then in your own site that you're building as well, set up a default header and then set up a custom header. And if you have more markup, it may look a little bit different, but the idea is to explore, try pushing and trying new things. Even if questions come up or things break, we'll get to it eventually and cover it, but it's good for you to practice this on your own. So go ahead and do that now, and then we'll pick back up with the footers.